Hello and welcome. My name is Erica Barajas, and I'm a printmaking artist in Oakland, California, here in the United States. In 2021, I organized a print exchange called eMERGE with the help of a membership engagement grant from the California Society of Printmakers. During our talk today, we'll hear from two of the artists who participated in the eMERGE project, Kelly Autumn and the mayor. I'm going to play dual roles in this conversation as moderator and also as participant. Kelly and the mayor, welcome, and thank you both for being part of the project and lending us your time for this talk. Kelly Autumn is a multidisciplinary printmaker and teaching artist joining us today from her home office in Oakland. She has a BA in textile design from San Francisco State University and certification in printmaking from Diablo Valley College in Pleasant Hill, California. She's a teaching artist at the Sonoma Community Center and the Sonoma Valley Museum of Art. She studies with Toru Sugita and is slated to complete an associate's degree in studio art this fall. She's a member of the California Society of Printmakers and the Oakland Art Association. Thanks for being here, Kelly. Genesis Torres, working under the artist name The Mayor, is a visual and sound artist in Sacramento, California. He's graduating this year from Sacramento State University with a BFA in studio art. While highly active on campus as the president of the Print Club and founder of the Impact Club, he also has a curator residency at Faith J. McKinney Gallery. The mayor joined the California Society of Printmakers in 2020. Thank you so much for your time, the mayor. I'd like to start off the talk by having each of you introduce yourselves further and share a little bit about the print that you submitted to the eMERGE exchange. Kelly, will you get us started? Please tell us about yourself and your print.
Well, I just want to start out by saying thank you so much for having me, Erica, and it's nice to be here with you and the mayor. Yeah, so I'm joining you here from my home studio in Oakland, and let's see. I don't know what to say about this print other than I had a lot of fun working on it. If you want to show it, I can sort of just dive right in. Um, when I received notice that the print exchange was happening, I got really excited because I felt that this was going to be something that I could have a lot of playful freedom doing and making. And I sort of approach my practice currently with, I tend to work with a lot of nature and botanicals, and I love to carve and create insects as part of my art practice too, and that's because that comes from my gardening background and my love of horticulture and just the being in the natural world. Um, During the pandemic, we were all stuck at home, and I was gardening a lot, and I was growing my own food, and I was just seeking solace outside, and I was going for a lot of walks. And I don't know, I sort of, I latched on to the word. You showed the definition of emerge earlier, and I really took to this one sentence that was to move out of or away from something and come into view. And there was one morning walk I had where I saw a snail right in front of me on the sidewalk, and it wasn't a two-headed snail. That would have been really cool. But that's what got me thinking. I was looking at this poor snail, and obviously I didn't step on it, but I was thinking, gosh, there's so many people that might not be looking where they're going, and we've all had that happen to us in our lives, right? But there's so many things going on in the animal kingdom and the insect kingdom, and sometimes, these creatures, they're so small, but there's so much depth and they carry so much weight. And one thing I was thinking about too with eMERGE was, of course, a snail in its shell carries its house on its back everywhere it goes. And I was sort of relating that back to how I felt where I was living during this pandemic and the weight that I felt. So I think it had something to do with that and the eMERGE. And then, of course, there's a story that I like to try and tell with my work. So there's this crow in the sky, and this giant foot coming into view, um, is the snail going to survive? So that's a question related back to us, of course, with the pandemic. So that's kind of where my thinking was with this print. And also, I just sort of like to have fun, and I found it amusing. And I definitely had an amusing time doing it because there were some ups and downs with doing the mokuhanga, as there often is with printmaking. Things always turn out differently than how you think they're going to. So I struggled with that a little bit. And with the reduction print process, you're destroying the block as you go. So that was also another layer to this print, is that there's destruction in this, and chipping away at the block, right? And not being able to go back. So hopefully I covered a little bit about that. Now I'm rambling, but there you go.
Thank you, Kelly.
Sure.
All right, the mayor, what would you like to share about yourself and your print?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And I also would like to give a special thank you to Erica for putting this portfolio together, and all the lovely participants. So I'm really happy to be part of that list. And just a little bit about me. I am an artist and curator. My name comes from my activism in the art community, but as well as a pun, as in I feel like I have the keys to the city, either physically or through my connections to people, because I feel that is very important. And so I would like to share a little bit of information about my print, if you don't mind pulling it up. The title of this piece is called The Rapture, and it's a screen print. Usually I'm known for my large format monotypes, but with my screen prints, I usually touch on the subjects of urban decay. And so when I was thinking about this theme and emerging and emerging, I felt that topic was relevant to this portfolio. I feel like, one, because the urban landscape is always evolving, but in some aspect, you're also a part of that landscape. And so kind of those intersections of relationship is what I was thinking about. And so these pigeons kind of represent like our identity to being city dwellers. And in the sense of like people have a bad representation of pigeons. Usually sometimes they're called like the city's rat or things like that, or they're more of a nuisance, but their actual scientific name is rock dove. And they actually have more of a sentiment of building our society in historical terms. They've been companions. They've been ways that we've traveled messages in the past. And so with this rapture, I was thinking about old and new. And that's kind of the baseline topic without going too deep into it.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm just going to take a minute here to talk about the print that I submitted to the exchange. This is my print, Merging Wilder. It's a 4-layer screen print. And as I'll mention a little bit later, this is actually my second attempt at a print for the project. But it's inspired by like Kelly's, a walk that I took at Wilder Ranch, north of Santa Cruz. And I was really appreciating the intersection of the sky and the sea and the land. But the contours that are here are from that coastline image. And I was looking at how the different layers of color could interact with each other, much in the way that the horizon line of the ocean and the sky could interact, or the ocean splashing on the shore, and wanted to, I'd been staring at this photo for a long time because of the original print that I had been working on, and was really starting to look at it differently. And the colors that I'd been using, I was getting more and more fond of them, but wanting them to be more complex. And so what I came to was using these contours and the screens that I had set up, and moving them around and getting them to interact with each other, thinking about the complexity of ecological interactions and diverse biological communities, and how we're all connected, and that the sense of being separate is an illusion that we kind of hold on to. So I really was longing for that connection throughout this whole project, honestly, just feeling like I wanted to counteract the isolation that I felt, and looking for a connection, a visual connection to that longing. So thanks for letting me share about this print. The next question for the three of us is, what were some challenges you encountered in the printmaking process? Kelly?
Yeah, well, I kind of touched on it a little bit with the print. I used a process where I was painting on the block with mokuhanga and the reduction going on. So I had a lot of moving parts. And all that I have left really is the snail shell to show. So I was really amused through this whole process because I painted on the shell as with mokuhanga with the water-based inks, and then I actually had to start using some oil-based inks to try to grab the shape of the snail shell, and I was sort of swirling the design like a snail shell looks in realistic form, and to get enough pressure, because I was actually printing from home, I actually had to step on the shell and with a really hard shoe. So that was also part of the joke with me producing the print, because there's the shoe and a foot obviously in the print. So it was sort of like an internal dialogue going on with myself on creating this eMERGE, and actually stepping on the snail. So that's that's sort of the background with that. But I did, with my foot, I was able to get enough pressure off the shell and pull the print, because that was the final layer on the block when everything was done. So there you have it.
Great to hear about the performative aspect of the project.
Surprise!
Thank you. And the mayor, would you like to share any challenges that you encountered in the printing process?
For me, it was more my accessibility to equipment. At the time, the lab was under construction, so troubleshooting was more of my issue during this time, but it also challenged me, and I feel like a better screen printer for that. So that's all.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I definitely had some challenges, especially with the original print that I was working on. I was doing a reduction lino cut like Kelly, and so I've got the final layer here that I still haven't printed, mainly because of inking issues. So I got this far with it.
It looks amazing.
And I don't know
Is it dry?
I'm not sure if my microphone will pick up the
tack.
this sound, but essentially ended up getting this far, and then I tried to stack it up with the other prints, the other artist prints, so that I could measure how high the portfolio housing would need to be. And I put a piece of glassine on here. And with a couple minutes later, when I went to go unstack the prints, I couldn't peel the glassine off. It was like fused for life. So I had a little freak out, and then I realized that I'd been staring at it for so long that it was starting to lose meaning for me. And so I just said, you know what, I'll just consider that research, and moved on. So I only had so much time at that point. So I switched to screen printing. But I really do think that going through the process with this brought me to a print that I actually enjoy better. I think it's more interesting than the one I originally intended to make. And so, you know, the process there is just it's embedded in the product for me, but that's what I had to go through to make this happen. So I welcome these kinds of challenges, because sometimes they take you to a place that you beyond where you expected to go. Now we've got our next question. The mayor actually submitted and would like to know what our first reactions were to viewing the portfolio when it first arrived. The mayor, will you share how you reacted when you saw it?
Well, I think you did a wonderful job on that laser cut. It looked so beautiful and clean. So that was my first impression. And then opening the portfolio, I'm not sure if you did that for every artist, if you put their own print on top, but I thought that was,
I did.
and yeah, just the range of like materials and yeah, just the range of techniques was really surprising to me. And so that was my first reaction. So it was something like, after I looked through it briefly, I knew I needed way more time to analyze, especially the one with the fabric and it has like, seems like a newsprint lettering. And so all these fine details that everyone worked on, it was definitely needed that time and space to like revisit. Besides that first opening, I actually showed it to the print class and they all really enjoyed it. So yeah, that was my first reaction.
That's great. Thank you so much. And Kelly, how about you?
Oh, it was amazing. I just want to use this as a space to also just say thank you for putting this together and all the efforts. I know that with your struggles, we talked about that, how you started over and, you know, but I think what you came up with, I just wanted to say I love it. And I think you should feel really proud of that print that you did complete. And I am just really, I feel really grateful to be a part of this eMERGE portfolio too during the pandemic. Um, this was such a personal project, as these print exchanges are for all of us that are able to do them. It's such a gift to have everyone's artwork. And then also, as a teaching artist too, this is such a great tool to understand other mediums and, you know, study and share, like you were saying too. So I took it to Toru's class, and Toru was actually, of course, since he's my mentor and I study with him, he was the first person to introduce me to print exchanges, and we do that usually at the end of every semester. And with pandemic, we had some challenges of actually completing them recently, but I was able just a few weeks ago when the exchange was given to me that I took it to the screen printing class and I did a little exercise with him and I set out each page, each print, and we had the students guess if they could what mediums, specifically which prints were done by screen print. And so that was pretty cool. And then we talked about the methods. And since both of you also created screen prints, that was really interesting to be able to talk to the students about that and to share. And, you know, it gives them new ideas too. And so that was really cool. And I just love all the details that you put into it. The laser cutting, the folding, especially too, I'm glad that you pointed out about putting our prints on top. And I think your top sheet, everything that you did to explain the process for each artist. And it was just so well done. And thank you, Erica, and thank you to all the artists who participated in this. It's really, really a cool project, and I'm so glad to be a part of it.
I'm so thankful. I appreciate those kind words. And I just want to, I guess, show what she's talking about when it comes to the portfolio housing. It doesn't, there'll be a separate video really walking through this, but the laser cutout here of the title was the place where I put each artist's print in that little peekaboo window. So they got to see, it helped me keep track of which portfolio was supposed to go where, but it was also kind of a fun feature. So thanks for bringing that up. I had a good time doing it. All right, one of my goals in organizing this project was to improve access and visibility for emerging and early career artists. And each of you identified yourself as one of those categories when you applied to participate. What do you think has been the easiest and the hardest parts of being an emerging or early career artist? The mayor, would you share with us?
Sure. I would say, that maybe the easiest would be allowing that freedom of exploration. I think at some level of your career, you might get known for a certain series or body of work. So being an emerging artist kind of gives you that time and freedom to kind of play around with things more. What I find difficult is, I think, just like trying to find access to equipment, especially when you're starting up, or if you don't know a collective of printmakers yet. And so getting that foot into the ground, I think, is the hardest.
Thanks for that. I also I can relate to a lot of that, because I also think the easiest part about being this early part of my career, my art career, is that freedom to be able to explore, and thinking of it as like an ongoing experiment, learning about myself and developing skills and refining my artistic vision. So it's been essential for me to have a dedicated studio space away from home during this time. I have a very strong, like, don't touch my stuff vibe at home when it comes to my art materials. And with two little kids, it's pretty impossible to keep them away from that stuff. So I'm super grateful for the community and equipment that I do have access to here at the Compound Studios. It's in Oakland, and it's run by a couple who just do amazing things to organize the space and give us access to equipment. And as things will be opening up here, more and more public workshops and ways to connect from inside these walls out into the community. So the hardest thing I would say, besides carving out time to be in the studio in the first place, is struggling to create an artistic practice that's financially sustainable in the Bay Area. At this point, I kind of approach my art practice as a stress management technique more than a career path. And I imagine I'll always need some sort of day job to help pay the bills and fund artistic projects. I should also mention I do have the privilege of an extremely supportive partner. Thank you, Mark. And I'm hopeful that once both of my children are in school, I'll have more time and space to dedicate to developing a full-fledged artistic career. Kelly, would you like to respond to that question?
Yeah, I would say I love what you both just said about that question. I think that's a really important question to address. What is the easiest and what is the hardest? There's so many hard things about being a printmaker, right? Because we are constantly, I feel like many of us are constantly looking for access, especially as emerging artists. So that's a huge point. And if you're no longer in school or have community access to a print room, paper, inks, materials, the costs involved with things are, they add up. And because we're doing multiples, there's an advantage and a disadvantage to that, right? So I would say, just to add on to that, the easiest thing for me is the imagination. I love art challenges. And so being prompted to participate in a print exchange, I've learned to really love them. And also I'm sort of seeking them out now because I love the challenge and just the prompts, right? Because each one is so unique. And then alongside, the hardest thing for me is I juggle, of course, what you said, Erica, the survival, trying to have and maintain an art practice in the Bay Area, because we're both in Oakland. So I juggle a lot of jobs. And so I have to make a living and then still feel like I have enough energy left over to create. And also, just remembering to enjoy the process. I think because as printmakers, we beat ourselves up when something doesn't turn out the way that we think or we had planned. And the messing up and the intensity of that, of creating these prints, it's like there's so many things to remember, and all of those details, it's easy to get lost in those details and to forget the process of actually enjoyment of creating, right? So that for me is sometimes one of the hardest challenges.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate you answering that. Since we're all members of the California Society of Printmakers, and that's what enabled us to find each other for this project, I'd love to give them a little shout out right now. Have each of you, would each of you be willing to share something that you benefited from being a member of the California Society of Printmakers? Kelly?
Yeah, I feel very grateful to be a part of the CSP. I joined or I was accepted, I think, in the fall of 2020. So that was 2 years ago, just about. And I feel like I have a sense of community. There's many members that are in the Bay Area. And of course, studying with my mentor, Toru, who is a member of the CSP, I was able to attend shows and get a feeling of what they do for our community, how valuable they are. And I'm definitely a community artist, and so I love that feeling and the opportunity that they have with shows and with print exchanges and just volunteering. And I love our printmaking community, and I want to do whatever I can to help foster that all the time whenever possible.
Well, I really feel that you've been very supportive in this project, and I've gotten a lot of good ideas from you from our chats together. So thank you so much. And the mayor, how do you feel you've benefited from being a CSP member?
Greatly. Thank you for bringing up this question. Thank you all the board members of CSP. I know they volunteer their time and efforts, and they do amazing things. Not only are we a national organization, but also international. So having a large roster of artists, it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. And I also feel inspired by our members. So that's been a benefit. It's changed my views of the art world and printmaking. I think the very first thing that struck to me was there was a member artist talk and just all the beautiful information and just the different types of modes everyone worked. It was just like a beautiful, lovely community. I didn't feel like anyone, usually there's different temperaments, but everyone's was very respectful and appreciative of the experience, no matter what their level of career was. And so I really appreciate being part of a humble and talented group. So yeah, I really do love the CSP. So thank you.
If you'd like to learn more about the California Society of Printmakers, please visit their website at caprintmakers.org. And speaking of learning more about things, what's the best way for people to learn more about each of you and your ongoing projects? The mayor?
For me, I'm curating this big event with the city of Sacramento called Coordinates Ice Pack. And it's a site-specific exhibition. And how you can learn more about it is coordinatesexhibition.com, or it's also the same tag name in Instagram, Coordinates Exhibition. And then you can learn more about me at genesisportfolio.com or genesis.portfolio on Instagram.
Great, thanks. We look forward to hearing more about the Coordinates project. And Kelly, how can people learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, I have a website, so it's just kellyautumn.com, my name. And then I post my most recent projects that I'm working on Instagram. And again, it's the same, my name on Instagram. And yeah, I've got a pretty heavy teaching schedule coming up with workshops that I'm excited about right into summer.
Oh, that's great. All right, well, and I will make sure to include those links in the description for this video so people can find it even easier. Thank you so much to the artist, the mayor, and Kelly Autumn for joining me today. You've shared about your experiences as participants in the eMERGE print exchange. I feel like I've learned a lot more about both of you, so thank you so much for your time. To those of you watching, please remember to visit the online exhibition to take a closer look at all of the prints in the portfolio, and make sure to support each of these talented people to sustain and build their careers. Follow the link in the video description to see the exhibition, and you can hear from some of the other eMERGE artists on this channel as further artist talks are released during the exhibition period. I'd like to again acknowledge the key role of the California Society of Printmakers that they played in the creation and implementation of this project. Thank you so much for watching. May you be well.